You see, when we begin to look inward, when we start to ask that most peculiar question, who am I? Something strange begins to happen. For the first time, we notice that the one asking the question is not so easily found. We say, I am myself, and yet what is that? Are you your body? Are you your thoughts? Are you the roles you play, a son, a student, a lover, a worker? These are all things you do, things you experience. But who is the experiencer? You see, we are all trained from birth to identify ourselves with a name, a history, a collection of memories. We are told, this is you, and so we believe it. We grow up protecting this image, polishing it, defending it as though it were the most precious jewel in the world. But this image, this so-called ego, is only a story. It is the character in the play, not the actor himself. It is the mask, not the face beneath. The ego is a marvelous invention. It allows the infinite universe to play the game of being someone. It allows consciousness to look at itself through the eyes of a single point of view. But the tragedy is that we have forgotten it's a game. We take the costume to be our skin. We mistake the mask for our very being. And so we suffer. The ego is constantly anxious because it feels separate. It believes it is a small creature, adrift in a vast, dangerous world. It fears death because it thinks it was born. It seeks control because it imagines the universe is against it. But you see, that's the great joke. The ego is like a wave that thinks it's apart from the ocean. It says, I must survive. I must become a bigger wave. I must hold myself together. Yet all along, the wave is the ocean just for a little while, in a particular form. When the wave disappears, nothing is lost. The ocean continues to dance, forming new waves, new patterns, endlessly. We spend so much of our lives chasing shadows, chasing approval, power, possessions, identity, because the ego feeds on definition. It says, if I can define myself, I will be safe. If I can be known, I will exist. But you cannot grasp yourself, just as you cannot bite your own teeth or see your own eyes. The very act of looking for yourself hides you from yourself. The truth is far simpler, far quieter. You are not something within the universe. You are the universe itself, looking at itself. Just as the ocean waves, the universe peoples, you are one of the ways in which the whole expresses itself. Now, most people don't like this idea. It frightens the ego to think it isn't in control. It wants to be the boss, the pilot, the one who decides. But notice something. You don't decide to think. You don't decide to breathe or to grow or to digest. These things happen of themselves. The same intelligence that moves the galaxies also moves your heart. You are not pushing the blood through your veins. You are being lived by life itself. And so when you say, I lost control, it's funny you never had it. Control is the ego's fantasy, a desperate attempt to feel secure in an impermanent world. But the universe is not chaos. It is a flowing harmony, an unfolding dance, and you are part of that music. When you stop fighting the rhythm, when you let go of the illusion of control, you find peace, because the music was never separate from the dancer. There's a kind of grace that comes when you begin to see through the ego's game. At first, it's disorienting, like waking from a dream. You realize that the one you thought you were, the ambitious, anxious, striving self, was only a costume. You have been playing a role, and you forgot you were the actor. And suddenly, everything changes. Life becomes lighter, freer. You no longer need to defend anything. You can laugh at yourself. You can play your role beautifully because you know it's a role. This is what I call the divine play, the Leela of existence. God playing hide and seek with himself, losing himself in form, then waking up again. You are that game. When you were a child, you didn't have much of an ego. You were simply alive. You laughed, you cried, you explored without wondering whether you were doing it right. You didn't yet know you were separate from the world. Then, slowly, society taught you to identify with an image. You learned to say I, and from that moment, the separation began. It's not wrong, of course. It's part of the play. The ego is a useful tool. Without it, you couldn't navigate the world. But it becomes a problem when the tool starts using you. When the image begins to dominate the reality, you live in fear. You fear loss, you fear rejection, you fear death, because you believe the image can die. But the real you, the one behind the mask, has never been born and can never die. You see, consciousness is eternal. It doesn't come from the body. It expresses itself through the body. Just as music expresses through an instrument, the universe expresses through you. And when the instrument breaks, the music does not end. It simply changes form. The ego, however, refuses to accept this. It wants permanence in a world that is forever changing. It wants certainty in a universe that moves like water. And so it suffers endlessly. You can observe this suffering in yourself. Notice how your mind constantly says, I must become something. I must achieve. I must be loved. I must not fail. This constant becoming is the ego's hunger. It cannot rest because rest would mean death. It must always chase something, the next goal, the next identity, the next illusion of control. But if you stop for a moment, if you simply sit still and look, you will notice that underneath all this noise, there is a vast silence, a space of awareness that has been there all along. It watches your thoughts, your emotions, your successes, your failures, and remains untouched. That silence is what you truly are. Not the thinker, but the awareness of thinking. Not the doer, but the witness of doing. And so, the awakening from the ego is not about destroying it. It's about seeing through it. You don't have to fight the illusion. You simply need to notice that it's an illusion. Then, like a shadow, it loses its power. When you awaken, you still have an ego, but you wear it lightly, like a costume in a play. You can play any role, strong, weak, wise, foolish, without being trapped in it. You laugh more easily. You forgive more quickly, because you see that there was never anyone to defend. The ego says, I must be special. But when you see the truth, you realize everything is special. Every leaf, every stone, every moment of existence is divine, and so are you. The end of the ego is not a loss. It is a liberation. It is the rediscovery of your true self, the one who was never separate from anything. And when that happens, you no longer live in the universe, you live as the universe. The mountains rise, and you rise with them. The rivers flow, and you flow too. The sun sets, and you are the light fading into twilight. That, you see, is freedom. You see, the trouble with the ego is that it cannot exist without comparison. It lives only in relation to others. It feeds on difference. It says, I am better than him, or I am worse than her. It needs to be more, or it will feel like nothing. And so, all through life, we compete, not because life is a competition, but because the ego must keep proving itself. It builds its castle upon the shifting sands of opinion. It waits for applause to feel real. But applause fades, and the silence terrifies it. This is why people are so restless, so endlessly seeking more wealth, more power, more validation, because the ego cannot stand still. Stillness exposes the truth. And The truth is that there was never a separate I to begin with. Now, that realization can be terrifying at first, because if the ego is not real, who are you? Who is listening to these words right now? But look closely. The one who is listening is not a someone. It is pure awareness, the silent witness behind every thought and emotion. It is the same consciousness that looks through every pair of eyes across all of humanity. You see, we are all windows through which the universe looks at itself. But the ego puts curtains on the window and says, this is my view. And then we fight endlessly over whose window is better. Every argument, every war, every jealousy, it all begins with I and mine. The ego divides what was never divided. It draws boundaries where none exist. It says, this is me and that is you. This is good, that is bad. This is right, that is wrong. But nature doesn't think like that. The flower doesn't compete with the tree. The waves don't argue about which one is more important. They rise and fall in harmony, knowing that the same ocean moves through them all. We, too, are part of that same rhythm, but the ego blinds us. It whispers, you are separate. You must defend yourself. You must win. And so we live in fear, fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of being forgotten. But the great paradox is this: you cannot lose what you never owned. You cannot fail at being yourself. And you will never be forgotten because you were never truly separate. The ego believes life is a test, that there's some goal to reach, some final victory to achieve. But life isn't a journey with a destination. It's a song, and songs are meant to be sung, not completed. If you rush to the end of the melody, you miss the music entirely. In the same way, you are not moving towards something, you are the movement itself, the dance of existence. That is why I often say, stop trying to control the current. You are not the boat, you are the river. And the river flows by its own intelligence. When you trust that flow, you discover something astonishing. Life takes care of itself. You don't need to force it. You don't need to hold on so tightly. You only need to listen. Let go of trying to become someone, and you will realize you have always been everything. Let go of trying to find meaning, and life itself will reveal its meaning to you moment by moment, breath by breath. You see, the ego treats life like a problem to be solved. But life is not a problem, it is a mystery to be lived. When you stop demanding answers, the beauty begins to unfold on its own. The birds sing, the wind moves, the stars burn silently, and you too are part of that effortless wonder. But the ego is clever. Even after hearing all this, it tries to survive. It will say, now I will become a spiritual person. It turns even enlightenment into another possession. It says, I will be the one who wakes up before others. Laugh softly. You see the trick? The ego hides even inside the desire to destroy itself. That is why true awakening cannot be forced. It comes only when you have seen the game so clearly that you can no longer take it seriously. You smile at it, not with disdain, but with understanding. You bow to it as a teacher. For the ego, too, is part of the divine play. Without it, the universe could not experience the joy of awakening. The greatest freedom, my friend, is not to destroy the ego, but to see through it, to understand its place as a mask, a tool, a character in the story of life. When you see through the mask, you begin to live lightly. You can play, you can laugh, you can even cry, but now you are free, because you know that none of it defines you. You are the screen on which the movie of life is playing. The characters may live and die, love and suffer, but the screen remains untouched. That screen is consciousness, your true self. It was never born, and it will never die. It has no beginning and no end. It is the silence before sound, the stillness beneath movement, the awareness behind all experience. You see, most people are terrified of death because the ego imagines death as the end. It cannot conceive of non-existence. But what if I told you you have already died 1,000 times? Every night when you sleep, the ego disappears. It dissolves into the deep silence of unconsciousness. And yet, when you wake, life goes on. You are still here. The universe doesn't vanish when you forget your name. You don't stop existing when you stop thinking. In fact, in those moments, you are closer to truth than ever. Death is not the end. It is the return to what you've always been. Just as the wave falls back into the ocean, you fall back into the infinite. But the ego says, no, I must go on. I must be remembered. And so it clings to names, monuments, achievements. It builds legacies upon the sands of time, never realizing that the tide will wash them all away. And yet, that washing away is not tragedy. It is renewal. It is the rhythm of the cosmos, birth, death, rebirth, forever flowing. You are part of that eternal rhythm. You have never been apart from it. The ego's fear of ending is what keeps it from beginning truly. Because to begin truly, you must first let go. Letting go is not a loss. It is the rediscovery of your natural state peace. When you surrender to life, not in defeat, but in trust, you begin to feel a deep stillness within. That stillness is not emptiness. It is full of life, full of awareness, full of joy. This is what the sages meant when they said, be still and know that you are God. The ego cannot understand this. It wants to do enlightenment, to achieve peace. But peace is not an achievement, it is your nature. It is what remains when the striving stops. You see, the more you seek yourself, the more you hide from yourself. It is like trying to taste your own tongue. You cannot find what you already are. The moment you stop seeking, you find it. And then you laugh.